Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the sophomore album from Jon Pardi called California Sunrise. So do you ever have one of those artists that on paper seems to check off every single box, seems to be the sort of artist that you would automatically support, who may have even come out in a time when he was a breath of fresh air and a welcome surprise to everything and everyone else around him, and you're just not much of a fan? Well, for me, in modern mainstream country, California artist Jon Pardi was that person. Mostly because, on the surface, he was decidedly not mainstream. His debut album, Write You a Song, released in early 2014 in the wave of interchangeable bro country, his album is actually very much a neo-traditional country album in its composition and presentation. And yet, given that I wasn't all that won over by his voice or his songwriting, which kind of had an odd, presumptuous air to it that kind of made the romantic tracks feel a little bit hollow and shallow, I would only ever say the album is kind of decent, far from the savior of the mainstream for which a few critics lauded him. But you know what? I'll admit artists can evolve and grow over the course of a couple albums, and considering how much critical appraisal Jon Pardi has received from some sectors, I figure I might as well give him another chance. After all, with the increasing rise of very sterile pop country, especially on the radio these days, maybe getting a slice of rougher, more rustic tones would click for me a little bit more strongly. Who knows? I just saw a major improvement from YG of all people from his debut 2 years ago that I found underwhelming, so maybe 2 times the charm? Well, honestly, California Sunrise is the sort of album that I really have a hard time reviewing, mostly because, objectively, there's very little that's wrong with it. The sort of melodic, solidly neo-traditional country that might be a little bit on the rougher side, but still would fit very comfortably on the radio. But the more I dug through the album, the less I found that would really elevate it into the category something that I would revisit more frequently. It's a pleasant listen to be sure, but outside of a few isolated snippets, not a lot that really stuck with me, no matter how much I wanted to. It's a decent album, but it's not really better. And I'm struggling to figure out why that is, because like make it clear, I do like a lot of the music. If you're looking for a sonic palette that's got some pedal steel and fiddles, and you can balance them out with a solid selection of sizzling electric guitar and a bit of organ to accent it, this album will fit that bill, including a full selection of well-balanced organic percussion along the way. Hell, tracks like She Ain't In It would sound great on a mid-tier Alan Jackson album. The closest we get to mainstream country instrumentation is the slightly rougher drum machine near the very back of Dirt on My Boots, a song fresh from the Nashville bro country songwriting machine, and you can tell. And even though I'm not wild about the spiky fiddle line, the sizzling electric guitar solo does redeem it. It's not a bad song per se, and that's the thing. Jon Pardi often gives his band enough space to really flex out, especially with the guitar solos, which with the exception of the meandering outro and the opener out of style, they actually sound pretty solid. Hell, even though there are songs that you can tell are tended for a less traditional arrangement, the guitar rollick on Heartbreak on the Dance Floor, the borderline bro country of Can't Turn You Down, they're slightly more agreeable with the warm organic textures. I'm a sucker for this sort of instrumentation. But the more I started listening through the album, the more I started encountering the exact same problem I had with most of Jon Pardi's last record. The hooks, the melody lines, they were not standing out for me all that much. Sure, you have a few. The old-fashioned cadence of Head Over Boots, the warm rollick of the title track, the melancholy of She Ain't In It, but most of these compositions felt like mid-tier Jason Aldean cuts with the rougher guitar textures and slightly richer tones overall. They're not bad songs, but they're not really anything all that special, and Jon Pardi's delivery really doesn't help him. I've never really been wild about his voice, but this record helped me pin down why. His slightly more nasal tone can feel a little bit braying against the broader subject matter, especially on points where you can tell that he's kind of over-singing, and particularly when the subject matter and compositions trend towards the minor keys, it can ring a little bit sour for me. Now, that's not saying that Jon Pardi isn't capable of subtlety. There are real notes of sadness that ring through on She Ain't In It that prove that he's got more range than a lot of his songwriting would otherwise say, or that his voice doesn't work for this sort of country music. On the contrary, when they try to wedge in more synthetic backing vocals like on Heartache on the Dance Floor, it sounds painfully forced. And that gives me the suspicion that Jon Pardi's been fighting his label for more neo-traditional sounding cuts. Hell, he dropped an EP of B-sides last year to seem proof of that. And yet, as much as I can applaud his work reviving that sound and keeping it up, I'm not really certain his songwriting has gotten all the way there yet. And let me make it very clear that there is a place for this sort of broad, less complex material. The sort of straightforward, earnest tracks that would work with Jon Pardi's voice. And thank God there isn't that air of shallow presumption that rubbed me the wrong way on his last album. But here's the issue. Of the 12 songs here, a good 2/3 of them focus on the exact same topic of hooking up with a girl after a hard day's work, with a little differentiating detail between these songs, coupled with the lack of real standout hooks, makes many of these songs just start to blur together outside of a couple little details. It doesn't help that much of the slang that peppers these songs feels cribbed from your standard Florida Georgia Line song with only a little bit more taste. Jon Pardi might not come across as leering or as clumsy as they do, but there are definitely points where the meat-headed side starts to creep in a bit, specifically on one of the few exceptions to the hookup songs on Lucky, where he's hoping to get over his ex and maybe get lucky tonight. Kind of clashes with the more traditional side that comes through on Head Over Boots, or the old-fashioned moral to Out of Style, which really feels like a louder version of Joe Nichols' good old country song from 2013, or a slightly less cutting standards from Randy Rogers or Wade Bowen. The best song on this album, easily She Ain't In It, trying to block out the memory or image of an ex even as he has to come to grips with how much her loss has impacted his life. And surprise, surprise, it's one of the few songs that Jon Pardi did not write on this album. But you know what? I don't want to give this album that much of a hard time, because it's very clear that on some level, Jon Pardi's got his heart in the right place, pushing for a sound that I certainly find more agreeable. He's on the right side here. The problem is that you can do all that while still not being all that interesting of an artist, and that's where I fall on much of California Sunrise. It's a decent listen for sure, with She Ain't In It, the title track, maybe Head Over Boots as the standouts, but I'm not sure I'm going to be remembering a lot of it, which means it's getting a light 6 out of 10 from me. Again, if you like neo-traditional country, or you're sick of the mainstream that you'll listen to anything that'll bring back the good old days from maybe the mid-90s, you'll enjoy a lot of this. But I'm not sure it's got a ton of shelf life compared with some of the much stronger country releases we've heard this year. Just saying. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I know my opinion on Jon Pardi is not all that particularly appeasing, but especially considering some of the indie country set tends to like this guy more than I do. I get why, but I'm sorry, this album just did not stand out to me whatsoever. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums coming out that you want me to take a look at, I will try to give them a listen. And I got the poll up here, so if you guys all want to tell me I'm wrong, there's your opportunity. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.